My name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're playing
Oktoberfest! Furstenfeld!
So, in Furstenfeld, the goal of the game is to not have to do any work anymore.
Which is always the dream.
Yes.
In Furstenfeld, you sell crops to different breweries who have their own supply and demand tracks, so there's kind of a bit of market manipulation going on there.
The game starts off fundamentally as a farming, resource management type game, no worker placement elements. But eventually just sort of becomes, and immediately really, just becomes how much money you can make in order to actually create your palace and become like the big golden fat guy on the box. So without any further ado, let's play the game. Hold the gun!
Hold the gun!
Now we're going to go over the components of Furstenfeld, which is actually a demo copy donated to our Board Gaming Society by Rio Grande Games back in 2011. First, like most board games, we have the board. Next we have the demand cards, which are going to be on the board. These stay in play for the entire game. And we have the Palace Price cards, which also come with the Palace Price tokens. And we'll explain how to use those in a moment. Next we have the coins. They function in both the silver and gold variety. We have the resource tokens, hops, water, and wheat. Then finally we have the player components. Each player has a color, and they have a deck that actually has their little heraldry on it that actually is different for every single player, so make it really easy to note which are which. Every player gets also a summary card that actually functions just to tell you what cards are going to come up in this deck. And this deck is virtually identical for every player, except that one belongs to each individual player. You also have your starting field, which is going to be the same for every player as well, and this is what you use to actually create your own Furstenfeld. And that's it! Jason, take away setup.
Now let's set up Furstenfeld. First, lay out the board. Next, take the palace cards, put them in numerical order with 8 on the top and 18 on the bottom, and place them in the appropriate spot. Next, take the Palace Price tokens and place them next to the Palace cards. Next, take the demand cards, give them a quick shuffle, and you're going to take a number equal to the number of players, in this case 2, and place them on the appropriate spots. Next, set the demand at the indicated starting value. Next, players get their components. So each player gets a player board. Each player also chooses a color and gets the corresponding token, corresponding cards, and a player summary. So of course, Ken is going to choose green.
Hell yeah!
And I'm going to take red. Each player also gets 2 coins to start with. So next, you take all of the players' player tokens, give them a quick shuffle, and you place them on the 0 space of this track, one on top of each other. So separate the player reference card out from the other ones and put that aside, you'll need that. Now, if you're playing the basic game, which is recommended for beginners, then remove the tourist guide and scavenger from the deck. If you're just playing the normal game, then keep them in there. Then shuffle your player cards and place them near your board. And now you're ready to play!
Alright guys, there's actually just one more setup thing that I'm going to go over because of Jason's complete incompetence. He totally forgot to mention this.
I will end you.
Totally his fault and not mine in any way. You actually have to place out all of the tokens, so you place out your water, your hops, and your barley. Wheat, hops, you know, the yellow one. And put out your tokens. And you're going to be doing this, you're going to be like changing these things up a lot, so I would recommend getting little things to put them in. I have these little tiny plastic dishes. These don't come with the game, but I recommend something for you. So phase 1, all players draw their cards. Now in the very first phase of the game, all players are actually going to draw 6 cards. And naturally the cards are drawn from the tops of your individual player decks. Otherwise, after the first turn, each player is only drawing 3 cards from their draw stack, which in most turns would give you a hand total of 4 unless you've augmented it with other improvements and such. Phase 2 is the harvest goods phase, which actually can be done simultaneous in the draw cards phase. So all players can do this at once because it doesn't really matter who's doing what first. In order to harvest your goods, you place one of the goods tokens on every single one of the production icons you have on your board. So in the start of the game, you actually have one of each of the production icons. So you place one of each type of good on the board. Phase 3, sell goods to the breweries. Starting with the, player order is determined by this track over here, and this track changes depending on how much money you actually have. So we're starting at the bottom here, but this will change pretty immediately. Starting player is the person that is furthest down the track, so the person with the lowest number. In the case of a tie, say at the very beginning of the game, the person with the disc on top is the starting player compared to the other people, or is the starting most player, their start word, I guess. So, sell goods in player order. You take all of the goods you have, and you choose one single brewery to sell them to. So, let's say I want to sell mine to Altla Krosnetskolmer. I place the goods tokens on the appropriate icons on this board here, and I get the listed value for each one currently on the demand. All of them are currently set to 1, so that means I would get 3 coins. Now as a note, I'm not actually the first player, I was just using my bits because my bits are cooler than Jason's. But the other players all take turns selling their goods to one single brewery as well. Say for example, if Jason used this brewery, he would be placing 1 across here, and he would get 1 for each one as well. If Jason chose to sell to the same brewery as I did though, something interesting happens by the end of the turn. So notice here how there's actually not enough water spaces to place it in the topmost part there. It actually has to go to this little space at the bottom here, which is actually noted by a negative symbol. Jason would still get the 3 coins and take them into his own bank, but then afterwards, any tokens on the negative symbols are removed, and the demand goes down by the amount of tokens placed. Let's say that the demand in this case was all the way to the top, so it was all the way to 3. If Jason placed 2 tokens here, he would get the worth of 3 for both of those tokens, but then afterwards he would immediately decrease the demand by 2. Which means that if another player came along and tried to sell there, they would also continue to decrease the demand, but they would only get 2 as opposed to the 3 that Jason got. After a player receives their coins, they then put themselves in the opposite track at the value of their current income. This includes all the money you just gained and all the money you have remaining in your inventory. Both players do that, and at this point, since there's a tie, this means that I would actually go ahead of Jason, instead of previously before where Jason was going ahead of me. Phase 4 is the build phase. In player order, players can choose to build cards from their hand. The number in gold at the top corner is the value of the card. So if I want to purchase any one of these cards, I have to pay that value in coins back to the inventory, and I get to place that card on my board in any location that I wish. So since at this point on the very first turn you would only have 5 coins, you're limited to 5 coins worth of stuff. You can build 2 improvements every turn. So if I bought the laboratory, that would cost me 2. I would get to place that on my board in any of the spaces that I wish. And if I had the remaining coins to purchase more, I could do that now, but in this case I do not. The exception to the cost of cards are the palace cards, and these are the objective of the game. Palace cards do not have a golden value listed on them because the cost of them actually changes throughout the course of the game. The cost of the palace card is indicated by the palace card price cards over here. Right now, and at the start of the game, it starts with 8. So that means the very first player to purchase a palace card only has to pay 8 for that palace card. So let's say I had a lot of money and I do that. I would play my palace card. I would then take one of the cubes, and there's one cube over here for the amount of players that are currently playing the game, place it on the palace cards card pile. If somehow I was also able to purchase my other palace card that I actually have in my hand, I would place the second, because it's a 2-player game, I would place the second token on top of the palace cards price tokens, and when there are the player number of tokens on top of the palace cards here, the top card is flipped and slipped underneath the pile. This would now mean that if Jason wanted to buy a palace card after me, or even if I wanted to buy a palace card in future turns, it would cost 10 instead of 8. You continue to do that, the palace cards can go up as high as 18, and the first player to build all their palace cards is actually the one who wins the game. However, placing palace cards is not that simple. First off, in the basic game, you can just place the palace cards on any tiles that you want, on any squares on your board. There are 6. So at the end of the game, you will have exactly 6 of these on your board, in any order you like. In the regular game, though, they have to be placed in a specific order. Palace cards need to be placed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that is the Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the other corner in silver. With the exception of one card, Palace cards actually benefit you in no way during the game, but they are the only way to win the game. In addition, as you build the cards, they get placed over top of previous cards. So if I wanted to build Palace piece number 3, and we're playing the standard game, not the basic game, I would have to place it in this location here, which would cover over my laboratory and make it so that this space is now Palace tile number 3 and will never change for the rest of the game. You can never trash your Palace tiles, and you can never build over top of them. Cards that are built over top of are not accessible for the rest of the game. They have been used, they're spent, they're gone. The final phase is the discard phase. Of your hand of cards, you choose one card to remain in your hand. The remaining cards are discarded underneath your deck in the order that you choose. Your deck is never shuffled, so when you place something underneath the deck, it's going to take however many cards that are on top of it before you ever see it again. And you will see it again. Then finally, in phase 6, you adjust the market prices. Players can do this all together, and the market prices for each brewery are increased by the amount of demand that was not met. So in this case, this brewery has 2 water that was not met. The demand increases by 2. Has 3 barley that were not met. That increases by 3. And 1 hops that was not met. This brewery already had a decrease because of the selling of water to it. All the demand for barley was met, and 1 demand for hops was not met. So the demand increases. The round begins again, starting with the player at the start, and again, the lowest numbered player is the starting player working back, and ties, again, are dealt with by whoever is sitting on top, the topmost token. That's the essentials of the game. I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of the cards that are a little unclear or just a little harder to understand. That way you guys understand the use of them. First off is the warehouse card. The whole point of that is just to store extra pieces in between turns. You actually cannot store any goods in between turns unless you have a warehouse. Next you have the laboratory Type 1 and Type 2. Type 1 allows you to draw an additional card during the draw card step. Type 2 allows you to draw 2 additional cards during the draw card step. And if you happen to have both of them in play at the same time, that means you get a total of +3 cards during the draw step. So yes, they do stack. The marketplace allows you to sell 3 goods of the exact same type as 1 type of good of another type during the selling phase when you're selling to the breweries. So that means that 3 of barley could become 3 of water instead. You don't have to sell all 3, it's just you can sell up to 3. You can only use that once a turn. The office simply allows you during the buy phase to sell 1 type of goods of your choice as determined by you at that point in time for 1 coin higher. The magistrate allows you to move your starting player token down 3 spaces after you have determined your total number of coins. The building crane allows you to purchase all improvements for 2 coins less. Very simple. Very important. This does include palace tiles. Banks Type 1 and 2 give you 3 and 5 extra coins respectively during the buy phase after you've sold your goods, and those coins gained do affect your place on the starting player track. Town Hall Types 1 and 2 allows you to keep 1 or 2 cards, or 3 if you have both of them in play at the same time, during the discard cards phase, in addition to the 1 you can normally keep. The Scavenger allows you to trash, that is, remove from game, 2 cards from your hand. So rather than going underneath the discard deck, they actually are removed from the game. You can never access them again. Naturally, you cannot trash palace cards in this way. And finally, we have the Tourist Guide. The Tourist Guide actually gives you 2 coins during the buy phase for every palace tile you have complete on your board. So this card is kind of like a different type of bank, but it gives you coins for having the palace pieces. The palace pieces otherwise are absolutely worthless during the game and hinder your progress as you do better and better. As we've already explained, there are the palace cards. These are special cards. Everyone has 6 of them. In the regular game, they are placed in order 1 through 6, noting the Roman numerals there. If you're playing the starter game, you're placing them just wherever you like. And finally, there are different fields. There are fields of 1, 2, and 3 value, which allow you to create more goods and allow you to therefore sell more goods. And then finally, the game is over once the first player who is able to complete his Furstenfeld completes his Furstenfeld. Ah, hello!
Hey.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I've actually been looking for you. I'm having a bit of a shindig up at my palace tomorrow. I was kind of hoping to get a keg of your special ale.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen since you kind of stopped selling me goods pretty much altogether suddenly one day.
Oh yeah, I don't do that stuff anymore.
So what do you do then?
Oh, mostly banking.
So you're a banker then?
No, Eastern Brewing Supplies.
So you still sell brewing supplies? Because I'm in a great need. I will pay so much money.
No, I don't do that anymore. I basically just sit around my palace and bank.
So no brewing at all then?
No.
I see. Well, I would go to your competitors, except that they've pretty much given me the same response, so I guess there'll just be no beer forever now.
Oh, well, so when can I expect the keg?
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
So, tomorrow on that keg then?
Have a good day, sir. By placing all the palace tiles on his board. This will happen during the buy phase, and the game ends immediately. Or, if you like, you can complete that buy phase, and you have a first and second or third player, depending on who's completed their palace in time. Alright, now we're just going to move on to some example turns. So, because this is the first turn of the game, we actually are drawing 6 cards, where normally we would be drawing 3. And we harvest our goods as appropriate, which we've kind of already set up just beforehand. So, that was the first and second phase that happened simultaneously. Then we have the third phase, which is the sell goods phase. Jason, you get to take your goods and sell them to the breweries.
Well, it's such a hard decision. But I think I will choose to sell to this brewery.
Alright.
The Red Brewery.
Well, Jason, you get 3 coins for that. Woo! That gives Jason a total of 5 coins. So then he takes his marker and places it on the opposite track on the 5 spot. I'm going to take my 3 goods, and I'm actually going to sell them to the Red Brewery. I take 3 coins, and then immediately when I'm done selling, I take the one that ended up on the negative side, put that aside, and then decrease it. The demand for the water. I have flooded the water market. That joke gets used a lot, and it gets old really fast. Sorry.
Really gosh darn fast.
Really golly gee darn fast! So then I place myself on the opposite track as well. Now we go on to the purchase phase. I am going to choose to spend all 5 of my coins to purchase a town hall.
I am going to spend 3 of my hard-earned monies and purchase, I don't know, a hops field, I guess?
Yeah, it's an extra hops field. Jason can then buy 1 more card if he has a card that he could purchase for 2, which I'm guessing you probably don't.
I may or may not.
Well, you may.
I refuse to divulge that information.
That is fair. Phase 5, we now discard down all of our cards, with the exception of 1. However, since I have the Town Hall, I can actually choose to keep 2 additional cards in my hand. I've chosen my 3 cards.
And I've already chosen my 1 card.
The remaining cards go underneath the deck in the order of your choosing. Phase 6, we adjust the market. This happens simultaneously. Jason can help, but honestly I'm here anyway, so. So first off, over here, just a little bit of demand for hops. Over here, nothing. So they are demanding a lot. 1 hops, 1, 2, 3 barley, and 1, 2 water. Remove the tokens from the demand, and now you begin the turn again. Again, the first and second phase happen simultaneously. Jason, we each draw 3 cards. We then each take tokens equal to the amount of icons on our board. Jason gets an extra barley. Or hops, rather. The green one. You should probably place them on the spaces on your board, but honestly you're going to be taking them up right in the hand immediately anyway. So, Phase 3, we now go in player order. I'm the starting player because we are tied and I am the topmost player. I have 3 goods. I'm going to choose to sell them to the Red Brewery. This gives me 3 coins. I did not oversupply any of the demand. I then place my token on the opposite track on the 3.
Alright, so a little bit of strategy here.
Ooh, strategy.
So I have 2 hops to sell. I could use them on this brewery here, the one that Ken's already placed them on, but that would mean that I would be, first of all, filling up all of the hops, and I would actually be bringing the water can't go down any further. But still.
So you'd be at a disadvantage there because you would actually get 0 coins for the water.
And keeping in mind that I am probably... Actually, I'm not going to be first next turn out, am I?
Well, if you sell more than I do, if you gain more coins during this turn, you will be ahead of me. Therefore, yeah, I will remain first player. If you undersell yourself, you'd be on top of me, we'd be tied, and therefore you would be first player.
Regardless, though, I think it's important that the demand for hops go up, because, you know, I am the biggest producer of hops currently. So I think I'm going to leave those 2 spaces free, and I'm actually going to sell to the other brewery. So water goes here, grain goes here, and my hops are actually going to oversell. So these are all still at 1, so I get 1 for each of those, which gives me a total of 4. And then I move myself over to the 6.
Boop, like that.
Oh yeah, the other track. I also have to decrease the demand for hops at this brewery by 1.
Now we go on to phase 4, the build phase. Since I am starting player, I get to choose to build first. I'm going to spend my 3 coins to build the Scavenger, which will allow me to trash up to 2 cards from my hand at the end of every discard phase.
I'm going to try and keep my options open here, and I'm going to build the Laboratory 2. So that costs me 5, and that's going to let me draw extra cards at the start of every round. And that is all I can build.
Now we go on to phase 5, which is the discard phase. So my discard phase is a little bit more complex than Jason's.
I simply choose a card I want to keep, and place the others at the bottom of my deck.
And this happens simultaneously, but my turn is just going to take a little bit more time than his. So I have 2 cards that affect the discard phase. I can choose to trash up to 2 cards instead of discarding them to the bottom of the deck normally. And I can choose to keep 2 extra cards instead of just discarding down to 1. Keep that. I'm actually going to trash the Magistrate. Keep that. And keep that. And I'm going to discard this 1 card underneath my deck. That's going to give me 3 cards in my hand that I carry on with me to the next round. Finally, we have phase 6 again. And now we adjust the demand. Starting over here, there is 1 demand for water, 2 demand for hops, and no demand, or 2 demand for barley, rather. Well, okay, a little demand for grains, and no demand for hops. Because Jason is playing the field. Now, over here, no demand for water, 1 demand for grain, 2 demand for hops. Doesn't quite put it up to the 2s yet, but that's moving it on right on up for Jason. And when I placed mine, I was trying to be strategic as well, because I thought that Jason might try to do that, and it's in his best interest, because he has an extra hops that he's producing, for me to do so, to make sure that the hops stay down just a little bit.
Trying to oppress the hops, are you?
Trying to oppress them like crazy. Then we move on to rounds 1 and 2 yet again.
So this time, because I have the Laboratory, I get to draw 5 cards instead of 3.
And I get to draw 3 cards. Next we're going on to the sell goods phase. I am the starting player. I am selling my 3 goods, and I'm going to sell them over here. 1 hops, 1 grain, 1 water. That's worth 1, 2, 4. That gives me a total of 4 coins. I then place myself on the 4 track on the other side.
Alright, at this point I'm kind of faced with a tough decision. Now I could sell to the Red Brewery, as I have done in the past, and the hops token would slowly creep up a little bit. However, if I sell to the other brewery, the hops token is going to go up by 3 because it's not going to be met at all. Not to mention the fact that my grain would be worth 2. So I think I'm actually going to sell to the same brewery that Ken did. I'm going to get 1 for my water. I'm going to get 2 for my grain, which gives me a total of 3. Both of my hops are going to be going into the negative spot. They still give me 1 because that's where it's at. So that gives me a total of 5. I am then immediately going to move the hops track down. Now I can only move it down 1, even though there are 2 in the negative spots. And I move myself over to the 6 spot on the other track here.
Next we go on to the build phase. I'm going to spend 3 of my coins to build a hops field. I'm also going to get on the hops game with Jason here.
Now see, I am going to keep my options open. I'm going to build a market.
Ooh.
So that actually allows me to sort of switch up what I'm selling those hops as. So it gives me a little bit more flexibility. In addition, that uses up all of my money, which means that hopefully I'm going to end up with less money than Ken next time, and maybe I'll get to go first for once.
Well, maybe. Alright, then we come to the discard phase. As usual, I have a complex one. I can choose to trash 2 cards, I can choose to keep 3 cards. I'm going to trash a laboratory, and I'm going to trash this 3-spot grain field. And I'm going to keep all 3 of my cards in my hand, discarding none.
I'm going to keep 1 card, and everything else goes to the bottom.
Then finally, phase 6 again. We adjust the demand. Over here, demand was met pretty well. Greens goes up by 1 step. Over here, no demand met at all. Water goes up, greens goes up by 2, hops goes up by 3. We then clear off the demand track yet again, and we go on to the next phase.
So Ken, what do you think of Furstenfeld?
I'm a big fan of Furstenfeld. I feel like this is a really good introductory game to resource management. And by that I mean like a farming kind of game, but also like an economy-based game, such as Power Grid. I feel like this is kind of like a nice little introduction to both. I have a lot of fun with this game. I like that there's very little random factor, except for the deck. The deck of cards that you get is obviously the only real random factor of the game, and even then you can kind of you literally stack the deck as you go through the game. And depending on the different types of cards that you pull up in the first couple turns, like you get a nice little bump early on. Doesn't necessarily always help you though. So depending on the types of cards you can kind of get a little screwed for the first couple turns. I mean, honestly, when it comes down to it, the building crane is like a giant skew for this game. Because if you don't have a building crane for most of the game, well, whatever, like you're gonna fall behind. It's kind of frustrating. But I say, even if you fall behind a little bit, I find that doesn't mean you're going out, because falling behind means you're going to be the starting player a lot. I give this game a 4 out of 5 meeples, and I feel like that's a pretty good score for this game. The only place it really loses it on is that, and also the fact that I hate the box that it came in. Because the box is actually so bad, it looks like you should be able to put the player boards into the one side of the insert, and I'm pretty sure that was the intention, but you can't. You can't freaking fit them in. It's just like a millimeter. You could just chop off the edge of the player boards just a little bit, and it would actually fit in there. But I feel like it was a design oversight, and it's like the other side of the board has so much room that it wouldn't even matter if they cut off 2 inches of it. They even have the player board slipping around. I hate that. It's just close enough and just doesn't make it. And yeah, I know that seems like a stupid thing to rant about, but I rant about it all the time. And
he does. I can vouch for that.
All the time. You have no idea how much the boxes of games bother me.
For me, on the other hand, I'm actually going to give this game a 3.5 out of 5.
Which is still pretty above average score.
I don't think it's a bad game. Overall, there are just kind of 2 things for me. First of all, there's just not a whole lot of meat to this game.
That's fair.
I do tend to like the meatier, heavier games, and this just doesn't quite make it there for me. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, well, it's by Friedman Freeze, and it's got a Friedman Freeze patent pending, start player...
Everybody freeze! You get a turn, then you get a turn, now I get a turn, now you get another turn, that is it! What do I mean? No turn for you!
And that pretty much sums it up. It's, I love his stuff, I really do, and his player order mechanics do make a lot of sense.
And the player order mechanics, I always rib on his player order mechanics, but they are excellent. They do actually add a lot to the game, and without them, the game would be very different.
Well, it really provides a lot of balance to the game. But, on the other side of that, it confuses the heck out of anybody who isn't used to playing this type of board game.
Honestly, I was used to playing this type of board game, and it took us 2 games to actually properly figure out. The first time I played this game, it took us a solid hour to figure out how the heck to do the starting player track.
Yeah.
And even then, we realized later we were doing it wrong.
And see, that's really not a good thing, especially when you're talking about, somebody who's a veteran board game player like Ken. He should be able to at least figure out who's going next.
Yeah. There's also, actually, even up until we just did this review here, there's some parts of this game that I was actually just doing wrong. The way we used to play it was when you sold your goods, you just sold them to whatever breweries you wanted to in whatever sort of fashion. But finding out now that you apparently sell all your goods to one brewery, it's like, well, that changes the game a lot. And that was just an oversight on our part when I was originally reading the rules for the game, so it's not the game's fault for that, but there's just a lot of things that kind of are easy to overlook. Yeah. So, where do you think this game could be improved then?
Well, I feel there should be a little bit more to the game, like maybe just some other component in addition to the player boards and the building and the supply and demand.
Ooh, another thing that actually confuses a lot of people is the palace building stuff.
Yes.
So the way that the palace builds is like it's more expensive as time goes on too. I feel like that could have been simplified, but that's obviously also another balancing mechanic.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we were going to improve something, that would be another space to kind of look at, maybe changing the way that works as well.
As far as the player order mechanic goes, again, I don't think it's a bad mechanic. I think it works pretty well for balance and everything. I just really would prefer there to be some way to do it where it's a lot more easily accessible to people, especially people new to the hobby, because that's the kind of mechanic you see that really makes people scratch their heads.
Yeah.
Get confused.
Yeah,
So.
that one is definitely a place where I would switch it.
Yeah.
As far as meat of the game goes, a way that you can improve the game. So in another of Friedman Freeze's games, we actually have Power Grid, and you have all the power plant cards. And in that game, a way that they sort of changed it up through expansions, they've changed the board, for one. So the boards are different every time you play Power Grid. I don't think that would benefit this so much. Maybe having different breweries having different effects or something like that, like little like onboard effects, like nothing
I was just going to say that actually.
Yeah, so like when you actually place out like the demand cards, maybe that also gives an effect. It's sort of like if you sell more than like certain thing during a turn, like this happens, or if you oversell, maybe this happens, or something like that to make those feel a little bit more impactful. That said, though, I really like the supply and demand mechanic of this. I feel like that's really good. I really feel like that's like kind of the core of this game. Except that the game is all about not having to deal with that crap anymore. So it's like that's the coolest part of the game, and eventually, like by the end of the game, everything is like demanding 3, and you're like, whatever, I'm not making crops anymore. I've got a bank and most of my ballast done. I'm not playing this game.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing that kind of confuses me a little bit about the game. Like it gets to the point where you don't actually deal with the main mechanic anymore.
Again, the point of the game is to stop having to play the game anymore. Like that is, I wasn't joking when I said that before. It's literally how the game works.
Well, it's one of those things where it's almost for me like Robo Rally, where there's a stated
Yes.
purpose to the game, but that's not what you actually end up doing. So.
Well, no. The end goal is very clear. You make your big old palace and everything like that. The mechanics of the game get you to that point. They sort of push you along and get you to the point where you can make your palace.
Well, yeah, but in Robo Rally, you always start going towards the flags, and then.
Yeah, but that's like a thing that just sort of happens in Robo Rally. At least with this, the intended goal is
I
build
suppose.
palace.
I take your point anyway.
Yeah. But no, I agree there's a similarity there wherein, like, the idea of Robo Rally is let's have a race, and the actual thing that happens in Robo Rally is let's murder robots! Robo murder!
Yes.
Well, that's going to give us a total of 7.5 out of 10 meeples, which is still a pretty solid score, definitely above average.
Yeah.
I would recommend playing this game. As I mentioned earlier, this game was donated to us by Rio Grande for one of our Nova Scotia Board Gaming Society events, Boardgasm. I'm really glad they donated this game to us because, honestly, I hadn't even heard about this before they did. And when they did, I was like, oh my god, I have to tell everyone about this game. It is excellent. I really like it. I really feel like a lot of people should play it. I kind of feel like it's an underused gem. I don't feel like a lot of people know about it. If I say Furstenfeld, most people are like, what are you talking about?
Which is kind of surprising considering that it's Friedman Freeze, who is a pretty high-profile designer.
I'd say so too. I feel like he's mostly known for Power Grid. That's
yeah.
like the big guy for sure. See you later, and hold the gun!